Welcome back to Rockstock Channel. It is Tuesday, July 15th, and we are back with another installment in our Getting to Know You series. Today, we have Bruce Richardson, Executive Chairman and CEO of Anson Resources, which trades at 9 cents on the Australian Stock Exchange, ticker symbol ASN, and on the OTC, ticker symbol ANSNF. Current market cap is about 124 million Australian dollars, and unlike most lithium stocks, is actually up 32% year to date. You can follow Anson on their website, www.ansonresources.com, and on X at Anson_IR. Anson is developing a number of critical minerals projects in the U.S. and Australia, with the main focus currently on developing its Green River site in Utah's Paradox Basin. I've met Bruce over the years at various benchmark minerals and fast markets events, but relative to other USA lithium projects, I've noted that Anson has kept a relatively low profile since its work began in Utah in 2017. But as the company has signed a deal with Koch Technology Solutions last summer, received a $330 million letter of interest last September from the U.S. Exim Bank, and has now signed an MOU with POSCO last month, I thought it would be a good idea for me and our viewers to get to know the story better. For disclosure purposes, Rodney and I are not strategic advisors to nor invested in Anson Resources. And of course, we are not financial advisors, and nothing in this video should be considered investment advice. Please do your own research and read the disclaimer at the end of this video. Note that a written summary of this interview will be published in the next edition of RK Equity's Lithium-Ion Bull. Please register your email at rkequity.com if you'd like to receive this newsletter directly to your email box. And please make sure to like this video, subscribe to Rockstock Channel, and leave a question or comment below. What do you think of Anson Resources prospects? What other companies might you be interested to hear from on this channel? And with that intro out of the way, welcome, Bruce, for the first time to Rockstock Channel.
Thanks, Howard. Appreciate it.
Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your background and what inspired the current management team to come together?
Right. So my background has basically been a long time working on China, so in various capacities. And I worked in China for 15 years. I speak Mandarin, as does Tim, our COO. So we have a very strong China background. And when this industry commenced, as you know, and even up till now, it's dominated by China. Right. So we were looking for opportunities to get into this industry. As a group. The geologist Greg Knox has been working with me since around about 2011, so a long time as well. Tim and I have known each other, worked together in China previously. The group came together and focused on identifying opportunities for getting into this, what was then growing lithium-ion battery opportunities.
That's great. I didn't realize what a substantial kind of Chinese background you had, or China background, but that's critically important. Okay. And what's the history of the company, and what led you to focus on critical minerals like lithium in Utah?
Yeah. So back in about 2015, we saw the opportunity. We had a project, still have a project in Western Australia, which has graphite. Graphite came to surface. We started developing that. We went to China and looked to sell our graphite into China. They said, we've got enough, but if you have lithium, come back. At the same time, we started looking for those opportunities in Australia and the United States. We found this project in Utah through some people that we knew, and decided, given that the graphite market was already pretty saturated back then, we started working on developing the lithium project in Utah. The project itself was found when they were looking for oil. So this is deep brine, so around about 6,500 feet in one horizon, another one 10,000 feet. The pressure there is around 4,500, which pushes the brine to the surface. There was recorded an incident back in the 1960s where the brine came out of the well over the drilling crew. The crew was drilling for oil. It went through the horizon just above the oil and found that they were self-covered in caustic brine. geologists there decided to assay and identified very high lithium content, around about 1,700 ppm in one of the wells there. There may be a geological reason for that. We have not been able to re-enter that well, but the one next to it, and our highest grade's been 253 in the Paradox project.
Okay, great. We'll get into the details of the deposits in a minute, but like when I saw you a couple of years ago, there was the you got a Paradox project, right? But you have two projects in the Paradox Basin. You have the Paradox project, which you brought to DFS stage, and now we have Green River, which is your primary focus, but is at an earlier stage. So could you walk us through the evolution from Paradox project to Green River, now being your flagship project?
So the Paradox project was based on that original 1960s results for lithium of 1,700 ppm. That's why we went there. And how we developed that project and subsequently the Green River project is we re-enter oil wells where the brine has been recorded, and we perforate the casing, allow the brine to flow in, and then we test it. So we started that with Paradox. We did re-entry programs in 4 wells, established a resource of about 1.5 million tons. Then the next stage we started looking at was how to develop that. And as we all know, there was difficulties with the federal government approval process, something that the current president of the US has been addressing, have changed policies and still changing approval procedures to make it easier to get these projects into development. But for us, it became a bit of a logjam. And so while we were waiting for approvals for that, we came up with our own strategy about how to circumnavigate that or address those issues. That led us to Green River. So we'd found that the brine that we discovered at the Paradox location extended all the way to Green River, which is about 50 miles away. So quite a large reservoir, which, and as it subsequently turned out to be one joined reservoir. There's nothing that breaks it up. So we knew that the brine was out there, but we didn't know that what the grade was. No one had assayed it, unlike what had happened down there at the Paradox. So we made a decision to find ways to avoid federal government approval process. During the Biden administration, that was difficult. So we acquired land. We used the money that we raised to purchase some land at Green River in the city limits. It's a brownfields area with extensive infrastructure. So that's road, rail, electricity, people, water, everything you need for a project, which while that was available at the Paradox project, it was more difficult to connect up to get into production, as well as having government approval. So at Green River, we have 147 acres of our own land. We need about 20 for a plant. We have drilled a well there. The first well we drilled in April last year. It took 3 months for the approval process because we only needed approval from the state government. The Paradox, we had 3.5 years in the approval process. So completely different situation as trying to get a project into production. Much simpler, much quicker, fantastic infrastructure, great government support, both from state and from local councils, county. So really a completely different situation there compared to Paradox. So Paradox is actually caught up now with where we were with Paradox. The Green River project kept caught up to that now. So we're very happy about the change. Paradox is still there, and we're still considering to how that moves forward. The government is now approving things a lot faster since Donald Trump became president. We've seen that firsthand, and still gives us some encouragement to develop that project. But at the moment, our focus is really on Green River.
Okay. So, what are the basic parameters of the Green River project in terms of resource size, grade? What are your production size plans? Any CapEx or OpEx knowledge yet? Like what stage of development it's at? I'm not sure if you know everything that I just asked you, but why don't you let us know?
Yeah, sure. So, all the approvals are just about done. So I think there's one that's pending, which is the mining license. So a mining license is not really subject to um, some barriers that stop you from getting production. It's more about procedure. So how are you going to extract it? How are you going to develop the project? What safety processes do you have in place? How are you going to rehabilitate the area once you finish that type of approval? So we've lodged that application. It takes 6 to 12 months for that approval to come through. It's large scale mining license is what we've asked for there. So we're pretty happy with the way that the permitting has gone. So we've had approvals for everything now, apart from actually getting into operation. So that's a big tick. We have around about 138 ppm. The work that we had that assay by SGS, and that's the grade. The big deal here is the purity of the brine, which is much better than a lot of other brines around. Slightly better than what we have at the Paradox. So I'll get into that maybe later. But all these parameters for the project make it very um, economic, including the purity, but also we have the pressure, porosity, and permeability of the area. So one of the things that this geological features in the area provide these the pressure, the porosity, and permeability, and the purity. So four Ps, and all that adds up to a very good project. We have it currently around about 150,000 tons in the JORC resource. There's some upgrades that we need to do. We put out an announcement about that, and we're still working through that with the third party that does our JORC resource. We expect that will be further increased with an additional drilling program at a well called Mount Fuel Geyser. So Geyser gives you an idea of the why or the proof that there is a lot of pressure and porosity permeability here because the brine is coming to surface through a geyser. So all these factors add up to a very good project. We expect 1.5 million tons is what we achieved in Paradox. We expect we'll achieve that too this year, supporting our project, which we currently are looking to produce 10,000 tons per annum. So a very good resource, and with opportunity to further increase that.
Okay, so you think with additional drilling, you're going to grow by 10x, the JORC resource from 150 to 1.5 million, and the plan is for a 10,000 tons a year. I guess you could scale that up if you do have a bigger resource side. But I mean, is your focus 10,000 tons as a more manageable size
Yeah.
and CapEx to start with?
Yeah, it's about the maximum that we could do as a small company that we are, right? So raising something around about 500 million, as we did in the Paradox. The DFS was just under 500. We expect it's going to be the same for Green River. And all the work that we've done down at Paradox in its geology and estimating resource, it's very similar, which gives us the confidence that we'll be able to achieve 1.5 million tons. We've also been doing a lot of work on modeling. So currently we're using something called a patrol model, which is used by oil companies to estimate oil resources. So it's an upgrade of what we did down there at the Paradox, and shows us exactly the impact of the geological features on the brine. So where the thicker areas might be, with better locations for extraction, and also where we put the brine back. That's identified through those models. So all those things gives the confidence that the 100,000 tons we have at the moment will be upgraded to 1.5 over the next 6 months or so, and then that's sufficient to support the economics for a 10,000 ton per annum project over 20 years or so.
Okay, this 500 million CapEx that you're suggesting was Paradox and is likely to be the same for Green River. I mean, what stage is there a PA? Have you ever published public economics for Green River?
We haven't. We have internal. So the sort of the rule of thumb here that we use is $500 million for Paradox. Since we did that, I think in 2023, there's been inflation, there's been changes, etc. So the size of the plant's the same. Why we think it'll end up about the same is because we don't need to build so much infrastructure compared to that of Paradox. So the power line is shorter, the water pipeline is shorter, etc. So all those things that we've done internally indicates that the CapEx should be approximately the same as what we had down there at the paradox, despite the changes over the years.
Okay. We'll flash up a map here to just give perspective of what the infrastructure looks like and how close Green River and Paradox projects are to each other. But I just want to address that question. The ppm you said was 138, right? Which seems low on the low side relative to peers in the Smackover or in Argentina. But I know, in liquids, it's not the same as, hard rock where you have a lot of overburden to move because, brines move. So head grade isn't the only factor. You mentioned, the impurities, but also, these four Ps, the pressure. If you kind of talk about why that's relevant.
Right, the pressure is really important. So the pressure at the Paradox project is around 4,500 psi, and up at Green River it's about 5,000. So your car tire has 37, very high pressure. And what this does is it pushes the brine to surface under its own power. So at the end of the day, the fifth P that we all look at is profit, right? So it comes down to your cost of production. So if you don't need to pump, you're saving money. And in this project, you don't need to pump from the depth that we find it. It pushes itself towards the surface or at the surface. Other projects in Smackover and Salton Sea, you need to pump, right? So same down in Argentina, you need to pump. So there is a cost involved in that. So it's very important that the factor, the pressure, that's actually an advantage. It's something that needs to be managed because of the high pressure. It can be dangerous, but these days, with the technology that's employed, we are able to control the surges that might occur in addition to that 4,500 psi. So that goes straight to the bottom line. The other important factor, as you mentioned, is the purity, and we have a measurement that's used in the industry, lithium to TDS ratio. So the standard for lithium to TDS ratio that companies need to achieve with brines is 0.08. We achieved an average grade of 0.12 with the highest grade of 0.132. That's the work that we did with Koch. So we were not aware of that being a factor when we started the Green River project. What it means is it also goes to the bottom line. So if you have low grade, and the head grade is not the most important. The thing is how much it costs to get into the final product. And by having higher purity or um, of less things that you have to get rid of, which all brines have because they sit in rock and they accumulate some of those things and the salts as well. If you have higher purity, it's easier and less uses less money, less processing time, less pumping, less chemicals, less everything. Therefore, your cost of production are lower. So in our case, we have one of the highest purities that's been recorded by the industry in North America. And that all it goes very well for our project as far as the actual cost of production and potential profitability.
Okay, great. So congratulations. I wanted to switch to like a catalyst for this, call, and a few people on X have, and YouTube have kind of like tagged me to say, hey, have you noticed they just did a deal with POSCO, and POSCO is now a producer in lithium, and they're all over the supply chain. But I first came into contact with POSCO when we were doing work with what is today Lithium Argentina, and in the Contrariolas. I just remember they kind of came in and built, on their own accord, a pilot plant, back in, I think it was 2014 or 2015. And then they've since gone to Sal de Vida in Argentina, and I think they're in production there, and they're also in production in Korea, from spodumene, fed by Pilbara Minerals. So could you share, how did the POSCO deal come about, and what is a path? It is an MOU. They haven't yet made a decision, to build a pilot plant, but, what's the path for them making that decision, and what, assuming they do make that, what do you hope to achieve from that pilot plant?
POSCO, we first were introduced to them back in 2018, probably about the same time as you were. We're in a conference in Montreal. They were then started their South America adventure. We showed them our project. There was not a lot of interest at that stage, but the world changed. And, Tim and I having our Mandarin skills, we thought in 2017, 18 that we would be selling our product to China. And we have a series of offtake agreements with Chinese battery producers. The world changed during COVID. Um, and then with the Biden administration and the policies they put in place there, the IRA, that started to turn everything around for us. We started thinking, well, that we won't be producing lithium to go to China. We'll be producing lithium which will be sold or used in the United States because that's the direction. And under Donald Trump, those policies have been reinforced in a different way, but he has the same objective of bringing back jobs to America and having domestic production, particularly of critical minerals. So that's all plays very well for our project. POSCO, we caught up again with them a few years ago at a conference in Japan and with other Korean and Japanese companies, and we discovered that they'd also decided to make the change or could see the future not being with China or involved with China, and they had to find new sources of materials in the United States, or at least something that didn't involve going through China, which a lot of the spodumene does. And some of the brine from South America goes through that supply chain. Cut off by the IRA and reinforced by Donald Trump, our project, North American projects, particularly USA projects, become of more critical importance. And that, we think, is why POSCO then suggested to us about a year ago that they would be interested in discussing some sort of an arrangement with us. And then maybe about April this year. Uh, some ideas were put on the table, and that's now worked out into an MOU. So they're a very meticulous company, a Korean company. Do cross the T's. I don't have T's in Korean language, but you know what I mean, right? Sort of get everything right or studied properly before committing, and that's where we are at the moment. They are very excited by our project. We've announced that they've taken a sample. We sent samples to them. It has arrived already, and they're already working on that. Um, I guess the way they do things, they wanted their own uh, pathway of how to proceed cautiously. Um, and then, if everything goes to plan, then at the end of this year, they've finished all their studies and their other work they're doing, and then we can expect that if it's all positive, they'll be putting a further deal on the table as far as the demonstration plant. We have some parameters, if you like, that we've already discussed with them, and then we see how that turns out in later this year.
Okay, great. Uh, and this follows last summer you signed a deal with Koch Industries or Koch Technology Solutions, for which they also provided some funding. And then in March, you disclosed strong results from this test work. So could you discuss the Koch relationship and the recent test work results and how this is similar or different to what you're undertaking with POSCO?
Yeah. So, POSCO, about a year and a half ago, we started talking to them, and I think the same thing applies here, that they'd identified that there was going to be a change away from China. It's something that they could become involved in. 2 years ago, we were working with Sun Resin on that on the design, and we did test work with them as well. Coke, of course, is American. It's the second largest privately owned company in the US. Very well known, very well respected in the government circles as well. So they proposed to us that they do a demonstration or a pilot plant program on site using brine directly from the well. We ran that through last year. Yes, the results were very good. I mentioned earlier the purity results, but also the recovery and rejection rates. So recovery rates was about 98%, and rejection was of the impurities, the things you don't want, it's about 99%. It's a bit hard to get higher than that. Given that chemistry, 98 is a good result. What we got with Sun Resin, we published 91.5%. There's others who say they have similar capability as Coke, but we found Coke very good. We're currently in further discussions with them about the next stage. Koch has, as you will see from Standard Lithium and others, that they have a larger, what they call a demonstration plant. So it's a larger volume, also de-risking the project by producing more than what they do with the initial pilot. We're in discussions with them about that and how our cooperation may also work out in the future.
Okay. So it doesn't. I have a question here, but it doesn't sound exactly like. Would Coke work with POSCO, or is this a situation where you have two potential candidates in competition with each other to strike, a deal to partner, at Green River?
Yeah. Um, don't know. That's a good question. Something to ask them, I guess. But currently, as far as we know, they're not talking to each other. Well, we have, of course, shared the results of the Cocos public announcement. We've shared that with POSCO, so they're aware that they're able to get to that level. Whether they look at other processes or their own processes, DLE processes, is still something which hasn't been determined. As I said, 98% is hard to beat. So we'll just see how that turns out over the next few months. So we're progressing with both. So there's sorts in competition. We like to think of them as being in competition for our business and trying to get the best deal for our shareholders. How that ends and finally, I'm not quite sure.
Okay, that's helpful. And I guess you mentioned a little bit on the permitting side, but like, from a path to FID, like what are the next de-risking steps before a potential final investment decision? Is there a timeline for the demo plant, full scale DFS updates, and final permits?
So we finished the work with Coke and DLE work with Coke, and from there, of course, is the next stage of purification, and then making it into lithium carbonate. Um, so those steps are underway. We have another party who's working on those things. We also have what we call the Lithium Innovation Center in the United States, where we do our own test work with similar, or if not the same, resins and processes. So we do like small scale ourselves before we start looking at larger scale. So we're just about finished all of that work. I know some of our shareholders are waiting for the announcement on how we went with polishing. So we have got very good results, and we will be finalizing them soon. That's part of the work. From that, we were able to establish something like a PFS or a PEA standard calculation on costs, both for OpEx and CapEx, but we need to upgrade those into a DFS, and we'll be doing that at further on in this year as all those results come in. The demonstration plants, gives you even more certainty, something we will consider and looking towards FID next year.
Okay. Um, and where do you stand with the key permits, water rights, brine extraction, reinjection, environmental review, any anticipated roadblocks? I know you said this is on private land, so it's a easier path, but you still need to tick all those other boxes.
Yeah. So we don't need any other federal government approval other than air emissions, right? So working in Brine, we don't have any air emissions, just other than truck movements, people coming to work, dust, right? So that type of thing is we've already done we've done that work, and we have that approval from the federal government. Everything else is either state or local council approval. Council very supportive. The mayor is very supportive. The council is very supportive. The people of Green River are very supportive. I think we have something like 120 signatures on a petition supporting the project. They were also very happy to hear the POSCO news, right? So that they can see employment coming for their children, which is the main thing that the mayor is focused on. He works as the principal of the local high school. So there's lots of good reasons for the community supporting us. We have a community agreement, which is very important to us as well. Um, so it's all around going very well. So as far as the approvals are concerned, they're state government approvals. So the subsurface is state government. We have all of those. Water is the final water, that means fresh water, that we're able to purchase that from the municipal water authority, right, where they have surplus capacity, but we also have our own water rights. Extraction permit we have, disposal we have, um, There's some construction permits we'll need, such as stormwater, that type of thing, the normal sort of construction licenses or approvals, permits that you need to finally get into operation, safety, fire, all those things we'll do as the buildings go up. So overall, we're very close to finalizing all the government approvals. That looks pretty good.
All right, Bruce, just, next kind of your last couple of questions. You currently have 3.5 million Aussie in the bank. Assuming POSCO goes ahead with their demo plant, which they'll finance themselves, and then the results of that demo plant are positive, and it's either them, or it's Koch. Like, how do you envision a potential financing and corporate structure to develop for the project? Where might this XM, LOI you got for 330 million, or other government entities fit in the mix?
Yeah, so it is a mix. So the finance stack is looking very interesting. There's a number of different options there. So you mentioned Exim Bank. September last year, we got that letter of interest from them, letter of support from them. And there's some additional work we need to do, which is part of those engineering studies that I mentioned earlier. The DFS would all be fed into them before they progress along with financing there. Strategics, we have a number of strategics. POSCO, we would identify as being one of those that is potential for financing either the equity side or part of the investment which we might get from, or the loan which we might get from Exxon. We could do it that way. Offtake parties, we've signed up one with LG Energy Solutions for an offtake around 40% of our 10,000 ton production, 4,000 tons. We still have 6,000 tons. We're looking for a second offtake party for another 4,000, and leave 2 for spot market. That would we're looking for that particular offtake party to invest, as well as one of the strategics. And there are other opportunities there as well, through government and non-government financing, which we're working on over the next couple of months. We should start to see some decisions there.
Okay, great. And then to your other kind of non-lithium projects, you have, I don't expect you to go into detail here, but you have Yellow Cat, which is a uranium and vanadium story. And then in Western Australia, you have gallium, germanium, barium, lead, zinc, and silver. How do these fit in within your overall corporate strategy for creating investor value? And given that some of these metals are hotter than they've been in a while, right? Might you spin out any or all these projects into separately listed companies and raise some capital that way?
Yeah, sure. That's a possibility. That's something we, as the board, has considered, and has some inquiries about some of those projects we have. Yellow Cat particularly of interest, given that's the uranium that's in there, and it's in the uranium belt, which comes down from Wyoming through Utah, and Energy Fuels, which are operating about 50 miles from where we are. The mill is about 50 miles from where we are there. We think that's a really good opportunity, particularly with the direction that the current administration is going with SMRs. Small modular reactors are becoming a thing, a way of powering the United States, which is, of course, one of those big issues here. How does the US respond to AI, or how does it keep ahead of China with AI? It needs power, and it seems like the only way of achieving that without creating a lot more emissions is through the nuclear industry. So we see that as being a really good opportunity. The West Australian projects, it's sort of the other way around. So you start with zinc, silver, and lead, and then the minority or the smaller amount of minerals is germanium, gallium, barium, etc. So that project we really have done some work on. We need to do some more work to sort of prove up that resource, as we do with Yellow Cat, where we have an approval to drill. Sometime before the end of the year, I think we'll be out there drilling for that to increase the resource. But we see a lot more potential than just the current area that we're planning to drill.
Okay, very helpful. So just, I guess, last question, unless you have anything else you want to cover, just, some investors, the U.S. has had a few high-profile names. As I mentioned, you've been a bit under the radar. But like Standard Lithium, Lithium Americas have had high profile, in sediments in Nevada and in a smack over in Arkansas. But from a Utah, based perspective, like where do you think like Anson fits into this USA narrative?
Right. I think it's a very important part of the overall mix that the US needs to develop, the US government needs to support, and essential for being self-reliant in lithium. There's not a lot of hard rock in the United States, not a lot of spodumene, and bringing it here is very difficult. Um, the supply chain there is tied up with China. So a lithium project like this, we've been working on since 2017. There's a lot of those now in the Smackover. I got to say that when we first started, they didn't exist. So we see that as quite interesting. Perhaps we've been overlooked. Perhaps we could have promoted our project a lot better than we have. But we have now like what we consider to be a unicorn in this space. Not only do we have the resource, but we also have a very economic way of extracting it due to the porosity, the permeability, um, and the pressure that's there. We have very high purity. We have a location where we know we can build, even though United States is difficult to get a mining project up and going. We have our own land that we can build on. That land is a brownfields project, so there is no studies that need to be done, or plants considered, or animals in the area. That's all been previously disturbed by Union Carbide, who had a uranium enrichment plant there. And part of the property was mined or quarried for rock for the I-70. The infrastructure is really important, so it's something that people overlook. So you might have a very high grade in South America, but it has no roads and rail, no electricity. It's very difficult for your project to be successful. But in this case, well, we've selected this site at Green River. It has all of those attributes, has all of those facilities, utilities available, railway sidings, road access, electricity goes through the property, and two lines, 138 kVA and 345 kVA, very high power, which is those things you need. And of course, we're on the Green River, which is where they get their name from. The city gets its name from. We have access to that water as well. So all those things add up to a really exceptional project, if not a unicorn. We consider it to be a unicorn project. We went and selected this area on purpose. We were fortunate enough to drill on that property and find the same brine that's down in the Paradox, but actually it has less impurities than that brine. So it's a better brine. So we have a superior opportunity there to what we found previously. And all that ends up in the bottom line of having lower costs and higher profitability. So even in this market, we think the project would be still able to make a profit. So that's very important at the end of the day. So all these things, like people sometimes only look at the head grade, or they uh, ignore the real issues there, where you might have a stranded assets up in some parts of the world where it's really difficult to get access to, and then the costs are just too high. So getting electricity to those locations, getting water to those locations, and water becoming even more of an importance around the world these days is really problematic for companies who are trying to do a DLE project, in a very dry area. So, we think that our project is unique, exceptional. We don't have impurities of which are difficult to extract, so some of the others in the United States. So yeah, we think we were overlooked, and we're promoting the project now very strongly, particularly with the POSCO uh, aspect coming in. That supports the financing of the project with Koch. So we have a American technology, not Chinese technology. All these things have added into our project. As you said, our share price is up 32% for the year, but in the past month, it's up 100%. So it's doing exceptionally well with 9 cents. We're 4.4 about a month ago when I last saw you at a conference.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was a particularly, bad time with at the peak of the worry of the Trump tariffs and the lithium price had taken another leg down. But we are now in day 16. There have been 16 daily upticks in the lithium price, and I've just completing my lithium bull as we speak, so we'll be publishing that shortly. And I make reference to like, is the bottom in, or is it U shape or V shape? But do you have any analyst coverage, Bruce?
Oh, we do in Australia, through a company down there, but we don't have it in the United States.
Okay, well, what company
A company called
publishes?
Petra? Petra.
Petra Capital. Okay, we know Petra Capital. So, any viewers of this, we get can get research, or we could put you in contact with Bruce. You can reach us at rockstockchannel@rkequity.com if you'd like to see any research notes for that. And Bruce, a number of your peers have listed in the U.S. In a more formal way. Do you have any plans to do that, given the profile of the project?
Um, we've looked at it, and the board's looked at that. It is, of course, something which it would be a logical step. It depends on timing, right? So, you need to have the right market at the right time to support a listing like that. Our shareholders in Australia have been very generous, very supportive of us over the years. But as far as the future and the larger amounts of money we might need to raise going forward, it's something that we're considering.
Okay, great. You mentioned Green River is the name, and it's the place. As we were talking in the pre-call here, as is my wont, to try to conceive of a rock music kind of narrative. Creedence Clearwater Revival is rare that there's a project name which actually is a song. So, Green River from Creedence Clearwater Revival. This is Anson Resources Revival. Green River is the title. Anything else our viewers should know before we sign off, Bruce?
I think we covered everything today, haven't we? So, yeah, we're happy to come back at another time and answer any questions that your listeners might have.
Sounds good. Thanks very much, Bruce. It's really been a pleasure to go through the story for the first time.
Thanks, Howard. Appreciate it.